This is Bill Baldwin of Boulevard Realty with an update on flood maps. Please be aware that the Harris County flood maps are about to change. In fact, the way flood maps will be determined is totally new and revolutionary. Make yourself aware of the process and the timeline at Map Next. Map Next stands for Harris County Modeling, Assessment, and Awareness Project, the first of its kind in the nation. It's the next generation of flood mapping using new methodologies, new technology, and new data. The new maps will be released in early 2025, and thousands of homes in Harris County are expected to be added to both the 100 and 500-year floodplains. Likewise, many homes may no longer be in the 100 or 500-year floodplains. After the announcement, there will be a period of 6 to 9 months of education and input. The adoption is not likely until late 2025 at the earliest. Please keep up to date and refer to Map Next on the Harris County Flood Control website.
HAR TV has expanded and we're now offering video services at 4 locations. Our Fort Bend branch located at 6608 Greatwood Parkway in Sugar Land. Our Montgomery County branch located at 25700 I-45 North in Spring. Our Bay Area branch located at 17225 El Camino Real in Bay Area. And our original location at HAR Central located at 3693 Southwest Freeway in Houston. All 4 locations offer all the same high quality video production that you have always experienced here at our central location. Contact us today to get your video appointment scheduled at any one of our 4 locations.
As realtors, we help our clients with all sorts of matters, including how to find available resources that may assist with the down payment. We are proud to announce that Down Payment Resource is now available on har.com. This will allow consumers to find out if they meet the criteria for any of the 70 different assistance programs available in the greater Houston region. Some programs are income-based, but many allow higher incomes than you may think. There are also programs specific for people in certain professions, such as police officers, firefighters, teachers, healthcare workers, and others. About 89% of all listings for sale in Houston qualify for some sort of down payment. To find out more, you may visit www.har.com/down payment and work with your realtor to make sure you have everything you need to be able to purchase the home of your dreams.
Good morning and welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Director of Social Media for HAR. And April, as we know, is Fair Housing Month, and we are rounding out the month this week with Alexia Smokler. She is NAR's Director of Fair Housing Policy and Programs. Welcome back to the program, Alexia.
Thanks, Christina. It's so good to be with you this morning.
Thank you. We're so happy to have you back. I know you joined our program, I think it was two years ago, maybe. And we didn't get to hear from you last year, and I know April is such a busy month for you, but obviously fair housing is something we need to be thinking about year round. And this morning, I'm so glad that you're able to join us and talk about some real issues that are still, going on in the industry, ways realtors can get themselves educated and better take care of clients and customers.
Absolutely glad to join the conversation.
Thank you. Well, let's before we jump into anything that I want to ask you today, let's hear a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your role at NAR and how it connects to fair housing efforts.
Sure. So I wear a couple of hats. I work in our advocacy team in Washington, D.C. So I am a registered lobbyist for NAR. That means that I advocate on Capitol Hill and to federal agencies expressing NAR's strong support for expanding housing opportunity and for strong enforcement of the fair housing laws. So that's one piece of what I do. The other piece is the programs, and that's building resources for our members. So that's things like Fair Haven, Bias Override. We've done a number of other initiatives looking at state licensing law, self-testing for real estate brokers. So it's really a robust 360-degree view of fair housing.
Thank you. And what inspired you to get into this work?
Well, it's how I was raised. So my grandfather, Ned Smokler, was a lawyer in Detroit, where I grew up. He was a member of what we think was the first racially integrated law firm in the country. They represented the UAW when they were organizing back in the 1930s. And the family lore that I grew up with was about how my grandpa, Ned, used to sign leases for Black lawyers to help them get office space downtown because the landlords wouldn't rent to Black lawyers. And so my grandfather would stand in and sign the lease. And so I learned from a very young age that racism is a serious problem in our society, that really qualified people who want to do good work are being shut out. And that people of goodwill can stand up and disrupt these systems. So that's sort of been my life's mission ever since.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And, as you mentioned, that was a long time ago. And some people might look at fair housing today and say, issues are solved, right? There's nothing else to work on. But I know that's not true. What are some of the biggest fair housing issues that we're facing in the real estate industry today?
Yeah, well, I would first point folks who have that idea to our snapshot of race and home buying, which the statistics really show the through line from those past exclusionary practices to the present. In 1968, we said discrimination is illegal, but that didn't make up for the generations that came before, where federal housing programs helped tens of millions of Americans become homeowners. They gave them a big boost after the Great Depression and World War II. So the federal government gave homeownership a big boost, but all those programs were racially restricted. So by the time the Fair Housing Act passed, a lot of folks were starting from behind. And they couldn't rely, if you look on today's data about where people get their funds for down payment, you'll see that white folks are twice as likely to be able to rely on the sale of an existing home. So that shows us the history, right? That some folks have been able to own homes in their families and others haven't. So, for example, Black folks are 3 times as likely to have to tap their 401k to get funds for down payment. So that history still shows up very much today. So even if we all stop discriminating today, which unfortunately we know isn't true, we would still have all of that history to make up for. So you asked me, what are some of the biggest fair housing issues we're facing today? So I would say, first of all, there's a bigger set of issues that are kind of bigger than any individual realtor or their business, and that's a couple of things. First of all, we have housing supply, which we're describing as a fair housing issue. As you know, we have a housing supply crisis. Housing is becoming increasingly unaffordable. And we know that first-time buyers, because of that history I mentioned, are twice as likely to be Black or Hispanic because, they don't have that history again. So the prices are pricing out first-time buyers. And if you look at what our research team says, that they say that the market is really bifurcating into those who have previously owned. They're going to be okay. They'll trade up. But for those folks who are just trying to break in, the prices are so high that it's becoming, more and more difficult. Mm-hmm. So the issues that we're facing, housing supply is a fair housing issue. Because no matter, even if we get rid of all the discrimination, if housing is unaffordable, It doesn't matter. On the other side, speaking of policy, we need to open up, access to credit. And I saw your ad just before this about down payment resource being available on your website. And that's great. I think I saw that you had 70 down payment assistance programs in just the Houston area alone. And what we know is that a lot of that money gets left on the table. So realtors need to do a better job educating their clients about these resources that are available. So those are the bigger picture things. Housing supply, and then helping folks who don't have that generational wealth. How can we help close that gap? But then let's get into a few of the kind of day-to-day issues that folks might see in their business as well. I think, one of the biggest issues still is steering. So that's, directing clients to a particular, toward or away from a particular neighborhood based on their background. And steering can come up in a lot of different ways. We often see it with conversations about neighborhoods, crime, and schools. Those are the three big ones. And you can steer without even being consciously aware of it. It could be due to implicit bias, which is just our brain's way of making shortcuts to help us move through the world quickly. And this is actually really helpful for us in a lot of situations. We can look at something and say, I know what that is. I'm going to deal with it in a certain kind of way. But when you look at people and say, I know what that is, I'm going to deal with that in a certain kind of way. And you're categorizing people based on protected classes, and your shortcuts are based on stereotypes, which we all receive from culture. Now you have an issue. So stereotypes can be applied to people, they can be applied to neighborhoods. So we have to really be careful that we have guardrails in place so that we're not making assumptions about what clients want. And I know realtors really want to be helpful to their clients and go above and beyond, but sometimes we can do too much. So let's really let the client lead. Let's ask every client the same questions. Let's have a standardized intake process so that we're really giving the client what they want. I mean, that's just good customer service, right?
Yeah.
So steering is a big one. I would also say, equal professional service. And again, and I tell everyone to watch the Newsday investigation out of Long Island. If you haven't watched it, it's a documentary showing real estate agents screwing up in all the different ways you can screw up. So watch it and see what not to do. Like, with equal professional service, you had an agent telling a Black buyer that they had to be pre-qualified in order to see listings. White person walks in, oh, no pre-qualification, that's fine. When can you go out and see homes? So have those standardized practices and procedures. It's fine to ask for someone to be pre-qualified, but we have to ask everyone. So I'd say those are the things in our business that we really need to be focused on is steering, equal professional service, and implicit bias. But then there are these bigger policy issues, which I think we're going to talk about a little more later, about the ways we can get involved beyond our business to make homeownership more accessible.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing that up, especially the issues around steering and the Long Island Divided investigation. We actually had the lead investigative journalist on this program a few years ago and talked about it with us. But for anyone who has not heard of that, I would encourage you to make a quick Google search and, like Alexia said, watch it. You can watch the entire documentary, and it's very shocking. A couple comments that came in, I just wanted to highlight. Teresa Hill agrees with us. The Long Island video is an eye opener. And then just another comment here from Felita I wanted to share. She said, Alexia, thank you for what you do and for the legacy of your family. So I just thought that was a nice comment to mention. If you have any questions for Alexia, please type them in and I'll be checking for those as we go through. So I would imagine, especially in recent years when we've, seen these conversations really brought to the forefront a lot more, maybe NAR has switched gears a little bit. How has NAR evolved its approach in fair housing in recent years?
Yeah, well, you saw kind of a big shift happen around the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act in 2018. that was when NAR began to acknowledge the role that it played in these historical practices. So I was just at a fair housing conference in Jackson, Mississippi last week, and they brought up an old redlining map. And they brought up the names of all the people who had participated in drawing that particular map, because for each map, they would use local folks in the community to help grade the community. And half the folks on the list were realtors. So this is our history. And we opposed the passage of the Fair Housing Act in 1968. But after the Fair Housing Act passed, we embraced it, and we began to move more into the realm of compliance. But I think now we've taken it farther. In the last 5 years, you had the 50th anniversary responsibility. Then we did issue that formal apology a few years after that. But really, the Newsday investigation, that dropped on us like a load of bricks. And we said at the time, we're not going to circle the wagons. We're not going to, deny that this is a problem. We're going to lean in, and we're going to embrace our responsibility to become leaders here to help the industry do better.
Love that. Thank you so much. And someone was asking about the Long Island Divided investigation. We did share a link in the comments. And also, we did share a link to this snapshot of race and home buying that Alexia mentioned earlier as well. So, very good. Now, misconceptions. I always like to point out misconceptions. Are there any misconceptions that realtors have about what fair housing really entails?
Yeah, I think some people approach it as checking a box, like I'm going to show up, take my class, and I'm good. And that's not going to work. In fact, if you watch the Newsday investigation, you'll see people in the hidden camera footage talking about something they learned in their fair housing class and how they weren't supposed to do it. Yeah. But I'm going to do this anyway. So one piece of advice I like to share is if you find yourself saying, I'm not supposed to say this, but just stop talking. That's really the best thing to do in that moment. So, some folks think, yeah, not a big deal, whatever, I'm going to take this class and I'm good. No, you're not good just by taking a class. You really need to establish these rails in your business, and it's different for everybody. I know everybody has their own processes and systems, but spend a little time thinking about how can you be more standardized in your business. I also think, another misconception is a lot of folks don't think discrimination in real estate exists. In fact, we've done polling that suggests about half our members don't believe discrimination in real estate exists. So to all those people, I refer them to the Newsday investigation and ask them, do you think Long Island is a special case that has more discrimination that doesn't exist in your community? Finally, another misconception, I think, is this idea that fair housing is like a gotcha. And that like all this discussion around words and phrases and how, what words are legal and illegal. And it's really about, the Fair Housing Act analysis on that is really pretty clear. Is your ad giving someone the impression that they're going to be discriminated against at the home? Now, was your association the one that got rid of master bedroom on the MLS?
Yes.
Yeah. So, that's like, compare that to Confederate flag, like in the fair housing analysis. Like if an ordinary person reads master bedroom, this is the analysis that a court would apply to your listing, to your advertising language. If an ordinary, not too sensitive, but not totally unsensitive person read master bedroom and thought, am I going to be discriminated against here? Then you'd have a problem under the law. Now, probably you're not going to have a problem under the law with master bedroom, but your association and many others have decided to take it a step further because that word might make folks uncomfortable and other words might make folks uncomfortable. But it's really not a gotcha about you have to subscribe to this list of woke words. The Fair Housing Act has a clear analysis. So Confederate flag is the one that I use to kind of juxtapose against master bedroom. If an ordinary average Black person, and that's how the courts would do the analysis, read master bedroom, would they think I'm going to be discriminated against here? They don't want me here. Probably not. But if they went through a set of listing photos and saw a Confederate flag hanging in the home, would they think I'm going to be discriminated against here? This might not be a place where I'm wanted. You can see the distinction. So again, a misconception that fair housing is a gotcha and that if you just use these certain words, you're going to be okay. That's really not what it's about.
What about any misconceptions around people with disabilities or and some of the other categories? You know, we were surprised to find a few years ago that here locally, people with disabilities are some of the people that make the most complaints to local fair housing associations as far as violations and stuff are concerned.
Yeah, nearly all of those complaints are related to rentals and not real estate sales. So that's most of those are like landlord-tenant issues where the landlord is not providing the accommodation to the person with a disability. And so it's very apparent and obvious to that person that, something's going wrong here and I need to go complain versus the type of discrimination you see in real estate sales where an agent might treat two clients differently, but the two clients never knew. And that's why we need testing to uncover this. So no one's going to make a complaint in that situation. If you don't know that other person got 100 listings and you only got 10, you're not going to necessarily make a complaint. So I think that's why we see so many complaints related to disability. So I would say that if you are in property management, and I know that a lot of our members are, you really need to study on work, these reasonable accommodation requests, and particularly the emotional support animal requests. I know that's one that a lot of folks struggle with. There are resources available on our website and on the HUD website to help you handle those requests. But it's about engaging with your tenant and really trying to make an effort to accommodate them if you can, and not just rejecting everybody from the get-go.
Very good. Thank you so much. You mentioned earlier Fairhaven and Bias Override. Let's talk about it a little bit. How are those tools making a difference?
Yeah, so when I came here, and I used to work at HUD's Office of Fair Housing, one thing that I kind of made my mission was that fair housing training has to stop being boring. And why should it be boring? I mean, it's super interesting. It's drama, it's injustice. I mean, so when, I mentioned in the Newsday investigation how one of the agents mentioned, I learned in my fair housing class, I'm not supposed to do this, but let's go do it anyway. We could see that this training wasn't really resonating with a lot of folks. Again, it was this check the box kind of a thing. And so we wanted to make training that was interesting, engaging, relevant to people's business, would keep people's attention to the end. And, people would say, could walk away and say, I'm going to apply this to my business versus, memorizing lists of protected classes and things. So that's what we tried to do with Fairhaven. You're going into a fictional town and you're going to different, it's different listings. So each scenario is a listing and you're a real estate agent and you might be representing a buyer or a seller. And you're encountering different ways that discrimination might come up every day when you're selling real estate. And they're all based on true fair housing cases or frequently asked questions from our members. Another special thing we do in Fairhaven is we tell the story from the client's point of view, somebody who is being discriminated against. what is that like for them? And we have a couple of videos of real people giving their testimonial. And we find that this kind of training really we have to open hearts and minds. And when people see that real human impact, it really gets people to pledge to do better. Also, in the latest Fairhaven, which we just launched Fairhaven 2.0, we also go into the NAR archives and we tell the history of housing discrimination, kind of from the perspective of the real estate industry, the good, bad, and the ugly. And we use all of our own archival materials, and we've tried to make that history engaging too by animating these materials, so it's kind of, I hope, like an interesting movie that you're watching about history. So that's Fairhaven. I can go into bias override unless you wanted to talk about Fairhaven at all.
Yeah, well, we did have a question that came in just in regard. You mentioned that it covers a few of the protected classes. It's the new version. I guess we've had some members express concern that the new fair housing training no longer covers or addresses LGBTQIA discrimination. Is that accurate? And if so, how is it chosen what classes are focused on?
Yeah, so that's not accurate.
Okay.
Fairhaven has 2 or 3 scenarios on sexual orientation and gender identity, along with a new resource page that NAR has created about serving LGBTQ plus clients.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So yeah, tell us about bias override.
So bias override is our classroom course, and I do believe it's available for CE credit in Texas. And this course is all about, I mentioned briefly how our brains work and how they take these shortcuts and how those shortcuts can be really helpful a lot of times, but other times they can lead us astray. And so this course really breaks down for people, and there's some interesting exercises you go through where you see your conscious brain and your unconscious brain sort of battling each other. And then once we look at how our brains work, then we dive a little bit into, what stereotypes we may hold and what kind of communities we've grown up in, and whether we've actually been exposed to people different from ourselves, or whether we've lived, kind of more sheltered way where we really only see people like us. Mm-hmm. Because breaking down those stereotypes is really about, it's a life journey. So you can take a training and you can implement practices in your business. But if you want to stop seeing people stereotypically, it's about forming those real, authentic relationships with people who are different from you, going to their communities, going to their home, going to their place of worship, and having real, authentic relationships. That's the best way to break down stereotypical thinking. So in that class, we have a lot of aha moments. We have a lot of emotion, a lot of breakthroughs. So I really recommend everybody to take it. And both of those classes count for the new NAR Fair Housing Training requirement that went into effect this year. At Home with Diversity also counts, as well as your state or local association can get its class to be approved and count to satisfy that. So if you're already doing it for licensing or whatever in your state, you don't have to double dip. Although everyone should take Fair Haven, in my opinion. But it should all count, is what I'm getting at here.
Great. I agree. Now, I know we have brokers that tune into this program. How can brokerages and associations like HAR better support agents in this space?
Yeah. So, okay. I think, I'm just checking my notes here. I think that education, but not just about fair housing and compliance. I think, first do no harm is definitely the first step, but that's the floor. Okay. Don't end up in the Newsday investigation. Don't go to realtor jail. That's like the minimum. So do that, but then let's do more. So how about educating our agents about all the different programs, the 70 down payment assistance programs that are available in Houston, and, learning more about which lenders work with those programs, learning more about HUD certified housing counselors in your area. Making it easier for agents to access these resources, maybe incentivizing them. Maybe a broker could incentivize working with a certain number of down payment assistance clients. Another one is, how about a language line? I heard that the state association in Iowa, and I read in some of your other questions that you're a very multicultural city and lots of folks from all over the world. You can set up a language line so that people can get real-time interpretation services. So be creative. There's a lot of ways to go above and beyond just don't go to jail.
Yeah, very good. Now, as you mentioned, Houston is one of the most diverse cities in the country. What role can diversity play in advancing for housing efforts here locally?
Yeah, so diversity and fair housing, they're related, but they're distinct. So fair housing is a law, federal, state, and local, that is about consumers in the marketplace. Diversity, DEI, or whatever we're calling it these days, is more about us. It's about our association. Are we inclusive? Are diverse voices being heard? Are diverse members being able to rise through our ranks? So kind of the shortcut is fair housing is about consumers. DEI, or whatever it's called now, is about us. But of course, these two things interrelate. I mean, if diverse members, if we're accommodating them in our associations, if we're beginning to understand them and their communities, and we're breaking down biases just amongst ourselves with our members, then that's just going to set us up better to go out and serve the community. So it starts at home, but then, we take it out into Houston.
Yeah, thank you. Now, what advice would you give to our members here in Houston who work with clients that, represent a wide range of backgrounds and languages?
Yeah, well, I got into this a little bit with the implicit bias conversation, but I really think it's about go there, go visit, talk to people, patronize the businesses. Maybe hire a colleague from that community. So yeah, it's just about opening yourself up. People move. One of the great things about America is that people can move to opportunity, and different kinds of people are going to be coming and going in our communities, and this can actually cause fair housing problems. When a new group of people comes into the community. And so it's important for us to be open to who's ever coming, because whoever is coming, that's a business opportunity and they need housing. And just to break down those biases, go to the community, get to know people. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, very good point. Let's talk about advocacy a little bit. Are there any examples of local or regional efforts here in Houston or in Texas that stand out to you as models for fair housing advocacy?
Yeah, I have a couple of examples. First of all, and these are both to do with state level policy. So Texas has a proposed bill this year, and it had one a couple of years ago, that would bar foreign buyers from certain foreign countries from buying real estate. And this is a trend that swept the nation. We've seen 20-some states pass these laws, and a lot of them are very, very broad and would basically exclude everyone from certain countries from buying real estate in the state. And so Texas Realtors collaborated closely with AREA, the Asian Real Estate Association of America, last time this bill came up, to defeat it. This time the bill is back, and it's probably going to pass. So they've been working together to really narrow and target that bill just on these national security concerns, so that just regular folks who are trying to buy a house are not going to be impacted. So that was a great example of coalition building and advocacy. And, that's sort of the diversity piece too, is, being connected with our diverse members internally helps us advocate more effectively externally. The other example I have is out of Denton, Texas. There was a homeowners association there that decided that it wanted to bar the homeowners from renting their home to voucher holders. And it was pretty clear that most of the voucher holders were Black, and that the homeowners association was racially motivated in passing this policy. And it was actually a realtor from Denton, Texas, who reached out to us and said, I mean, I can see, and she actually rented her property to a voucher holder. And she says, I want to participate in this program. You know, this is good, steady income stream. And as my private property rights, I should be able to rent my property to whoever I want. And they did file a complaint with HUD, and HUD did find that there was cause for discrimination there. But also in the Texas legislature, they passed a bill prohibiting HOAs from telling folks who they could rent their property to. So a couple of great examples of realtors standing up for fair housing in the advocacy arena.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing those examples. So how else can realtors really serve as advocates for fair housing, just beyond their transactions that they're involved with day to day?
So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, and you all are aware that realtors are community leaders, and realtors show up. And I think the issue that we really need to lead on is housing supply. Housing is becoming unaffordable. Homeownership is becoming, the American dream of homeownership is just becoming more and more distant for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And it hurts people of color disproportionately because of that history. So I'm going to ask if somebody could put the link to our Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook in the chat somewhere. I can find it if you all can't. But and we're advocating for a number of things at the federal level through the tax code to ignite housing supply. But the rubber really meets the road at the local level. So that means getting involved in your local planning and zoning and other local decisions, and standing up against NIMBYs, who, that stands for not in my backyard, people who don't want any more housing, period. Mm-hmm. With a lot of misinformation, actually, and a lot of it is kind of racially tinged, but there's this concept that if you build more housing, their property value is going to go down, when study after study shows that just isn't the case. Property values go up when you build more housing. So we need to be, we can be the boots on the ground advocating for more inventory. And it's going to take a lot to push federal governments in this direction and to sort of combat the NIMBYs, or shall I say, educate them. Let's put it like that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And just a couple of comments. We did share that link that you mentioned, so thank you for that. Just a couple of comments here. Mike Wong said, thank you to Texas Realtors and AREAA for working with the legislation in Texas. Yeah. And Peggy Pentecost had made... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Mike came on our NAR program to talk about this a few weeks ago. So
yes, he's great.
Great representative, Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mike. And Peggy made a comment just saying that this is probably the most misunderstood issue surrounding the practice of real estate. And I would imagine with the things that you see day to day, you'd probably agree with that.
Yeah, which issue? Yeah. Which
just
issue is that?
The issues around. I think that comment came back when we were talking about steering and redlining and that they don't realize that they're doing it.
Yeah.
Very good. So now, of course, we mentioned at the beginning of this program, April is Fair Housing Month, but how can realtors carry this momentum forward beyond just Fair Housing Month?
Well, I think I've said it all before, but let's close out with repeating it. So first, do no harm. Mm-hmm. First, do no harm. That means make sure you have the policies, the guardrails that you need in your own business so that you are treating all clients equally. And again, letting the client lead. So that's step one. And it's required. But now let's go beyond do no harm. Let's repair the harm that has been caused by past discrimination, and let's open up housing opportunities. So, I really think building those relationships with diverse realtors and diverse communities is not only going to help your business, it's not only going to help you comply with the fair housing law, but I think it's going to enrich your life. And also, you're already community leaders. Leverage that community involvement to advocate for housing supply. I just can't repeat it enough that, no matter how much fair housing enforcement we have, if housing is too expensive, people are going to be shut out.
Yeah. Well, Alexia, thank you so much for your time today. I know that I've seen several people saying this is great. Thank you. And I truly appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, especially in April, like I said. So we really appreciate you taking time for HAR this morning.
It's my pleasure to join you, and I hope I can do it in person soon.
Absolutely. Well, that is it for this Member Focus Monday. Now, next Monday will be our first Monday of May, which is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we're going to be joined by local leaders of 5 of our local groups that are going to talk to us about the issues that they see and the clients they serve and how we can all get better involved. So be sure to tune in next Monday at 9 a.m. to be a part of that conversation. Alexia, thank you again for your time today, and have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.